What you just saw here was a rigged game, which is just like the rigged system that we have here in Wisconsin to draw the maps and to conduct elections. My name is Sachin Chheda. I'm the director of the Fair Elections Project, and I still have my sunglasses on, which I'll take off. So we have a number of speakers here to talk about fair maps and what we're asking for. The main ask here today is to have the legislature move forward on the bills to make redistricting independent. We'll also talk a little bit about the lawsuit and the work happening around the state to ensure fair maps through grassroots coalitions. And so our first speaker is going to be the sponsor of the bill. This is SB 13, and that's Senator Dave Hansen, who'll talk about his legislation.
Thank you all for being here on this wonderfully beautiful day. At least it's not snowing or raining or whatever. But I have to mention what I hope for a fair game is UWGB women won their conference championship yesterday. They finished 29-3. They're going to be in the NCAA tournament. Very proud of my school, class of a long time ago. But growing up, we were all taught that every vote counts. However, that's not always the case in states where politicians, sadly, are responsible for drawing legislative district lines. Under the current process, many people might think their vote matters, but in many legislative elections, the partisan advantage for one party or the other is so significant that voters practically forfeit their right to choose their legislators. That could not be truer than right here in Wisconsin, where Republicans set up an office outside of the Capitol, met in secret, and required anyone who saw the maps to sign non-disclosure agreements in order to keep their plan from public scrutiny. It's kind of like what we just saw with this game. How do you say it? They cheated. The new boundaries they drew were so far beyond the pale that Wisconsin is considered to be one of the most gerrymandered states in the nation. I actually said we were the most gerrymandered states, but PolitiFact said we might be second or third. It's still really, really bad. So egregious was a gerrymandering that affected judges, two of which were appointed. While we wait a decision, hopefully a real positive decision from the Supreme Court, it is clear that redistricting reform is badly needed to ensure that the will of the voters is our first and foremost priority. One person, one vote.
Yeah, that's right.
Without fair elections, politicians can operate with little, and this is sad because I see it all the time in the Senate and the Assembly, with little or no accountability to the people. They are free to do the bidding of their wealthy friends and donors instead of doing what the people really want them to do. As we have seen here since Governor Walker, Republicans took control of state government, parties that have total control and no fear of losing their hold on power become bolder, enacting other laws to tighten their grip on power, like requiring voter IDs to suppress the votes of those who oppose them, and opening up, and I've seen it time and time again, the floodgates to corporate and foreign money to fund their campaigns. It is past time that both sides come together and do the right thing, and that is to pass. Change the redistricting process. Our bill bars the politicians. Simple idea, from drawing those boundaries, removes political incentives to rig the maps, provides greater transparency in the process, and requires public input before the maps can be approved. Yes. We'd have 3 public hearings, 2 outside of Madison, at least 1 north of 29, so that people can hear and see what these maps look like.
Yes. Right.
So we need redistricting reform now, even if it means bringing back the Assembly, who says they're done in February for the year. Amazing and wrong. We're calling a special session to do this. The people of the state deserve it. Our democracy deserves it. And taking the politics out of redistricting reform is needed if we are to restore, and it's so important, the people's faith in their government, and end the polarization we see every day in Madison and throughout the state. The health of our democracy and our state government is at stake. We cannot afford to win. Thank you.
Pass the bill! Pass the bill! Pass the bill! Pass the bill!
Thank you so much, Senator Hansen. Thanks also to Representative Buring for being the Assembly sponsor in the Assembly. The bill is AB 44. We need your leadership, and this bill's been introduced for a number of sessions, has only rarely even gotten a hearing. We're going to hear at the end of the program here from Senator Cullen, who's one of the previous lead sponsors and is one of the leaders in this movement. A lot of the work that's happening, you've got the lawsuit and you've got the work happening to move the bill. It really is a grassroots coalition of a lot of different organizations from around the state. One of the organizations that's been very active in drawing attention to this issue is the League of Women Voters. So I want to introduce the former executive director of the League of Women Voters of Wisconsin, Andrea Kaminsky.
Woo!
All right.
Having the ability, the freedom to elect your representatives in a fair contest shouldn't be a partisan issue. It's a fundamental citizen right. Yet Wisconsin's system for drawing voter districts has been used, abused, and distorted by partisan politicians seeking to preserve their own interests instead of ours. Both parties are guilty of manipulating voting districts. It often happens when the maps by themselves. That's why there are court cases in red states and in blue states. And what these states have in common is that they allow politicians to choose their voters instead of the other way around.
Yes.
The League of Women Voters has supported nonpartisan redistricting since the 1970s because we believe that fair voting maps are essential in order for government to reflect the will of the people rather than the will of special interests.
That's right.
As it is now, we have politicians telling their constituents, I don't have to listen to you. That actually happened, and that's abominable. It's because of gerrymandering that the chairs of the Assembly and Senate elections committees have been able to ignore the calls of 37 county boards, 20 editorial boards around the state, and thousands of members of the League of Women Voters and the Wisconsin Democracy Campaign and Citizen Action and Wisconsin Voices and Common Cause, who are all calling for reform. In the past 3 legislative sessions, bills have been introduced by Senator Hansen to adopt the very successful nonpartisan redistricting plan that's used in our neighboring state of Iowa. But the legislative leadership has refused to hold a hearing on those bills. Those committee chairs will tell you that they can't deal with the issue while Wisconsin's gerrymandered maps are in the Supreme Court. That is a ruse. There's no reason why a pending court case on a very specific set of egregious maps would mean that lawmakers can't do the right thing and reform a seriously flawed system for the future. We need to not give these partisan actors a pass. We need to demand that they convene a special session or an extraordinary session specifically to hold a hearing and pass the Fair Maps bill so Wisconsin voters can have the freedom to elect their representatives who will represent us and hold government accountable. Nonpartisan redistricting works in Iowa, and we need to give it a chance to work for us here in Wisconsin as well.
All right.
Thank you, Andrea. Voters. So I want to say 2 things. One is that this is a bipartisan problem. In Wisconsin, the maps were gerrymandered by the Republican leadership, but the Democrats failed in 2009 and 2010 to reform the process because the leadership didn't move forward the bill then. That was a mistake. The Democrats also gerrymandered maps in other states. On March 28th, the U.S. Supreme Court will hear a challenge of the maps, the congressional maps in Maryland, brought by Republican plaintiffs, maps drawn by Democrats. We stand in a bipartisan way to move these things in a new direction and in a new direction of fairness. We have a couple more speakers. I want to invite up now Renee Gash, who's a volunteer leader with Citizen Action in Northeast Wisconsin, to talk about the grassroots activity that's happening all over the state.
My name is Renee Gash. I'm a member of the Citizen Action Northeast Organizing Cooperative, and I drove down from Green Bay, Wisconsin to deliver 3,000 petitions signed by people to support Senator Hansen's legislation. Now, this issue is important to me because I believe that fair maps are vital for our democracy. We want an independent, nonpartisan process where the interests of the people of Wisconsin come first, not the interests of politicians, their parties, or their big money donors. We want our maps to be drawn in the public domain with citizen input, not behind closed doors at private law firms. We want our races to be competitive and contested so that new candidates feel like they have a fair shot at winning, and all candidates have to earn our votes. We want an end to partisan gridlock, with districts where moderates and independents have a fair shot at representing us. And we want to stop wasting taxpayer money on gerrymandering. Our neighbors in Iowa who have nonpartisan redistricting spend less than $200,000 on their election maps, but Wisconsin has spent $2.5 million taxpayer dollars on drawing and defending flawed maps. Now, as a parent and as a small business owner, I can think of better ways to spend $2.5 million, like on our schools, on our roads, on healthcare. So, and this issue has support from people all over the political spectrum, from liberals here in Dane County to conservatives in Calumet County, where last fall the county boards voted unanimously to pass a resolution in support of nonpartisan redistricting. And they're one of 37 counties statewide that have passed similar resolutions. If we, the citizens, can find bipartisan agreement on this issue, then we believe that it deserves a fair hearing here in the state legislature. So we call on Senator Devin LeMahieu and Representative Kathy Bernier, the chairs of the committees holding up these bills, to have a public hearing and allow the citizens of Wisconsin to have a say in how their districts are going to be drawn in 2020 and beyond. Thank you.
Thanks, Renee. We'll be delivering the petitions in the building afterwards. I want to now invite up Matt Rothschild from the Wisconsin Democracy Campaign, which is an organization that's been working on this issue for many, many years, trying to return the votes of the people back to the people.
Thank you, Sergeant. Yeah, I'm Matt Rothschild. I'm the Executive Director at the Wisconsin Democracy Campaign. I want to thank Senator Hansen for all his great work for nonpartisan redistricting. Look, we've got a problem in Wisconsin. We've got a crisis of representation in Wisconsin. The rigged maps, the gerrymandering that happened in 2011 denied people fair representation. And the rigging of the maps is just part and parcel of the rigging of democracy that's been going on in this state since 2011. The people in power in this building behind me, they don't represent the citizens of Wisconsin. They represent their donors. They are water boys for the Wisconsin Manufacturers and Commerce, for the Bradley Foundation, for the Wisconsin Realtors Association, for Big Dairy, and the big factory farms. They don't represent the citizens of Wisconsin. This is a huge problem for democracy. We are supposed to be the people that they represent. They're supposed to respond to us, not to their big donors. They're not supposed to be able to rig their districts so they're in power for another 10 years. Who, listening to me talk right now, can rig something so that they can be employed guaranteed for another 10 years? That's crazy. Now, fair representation in Wisconsin, fair representation in this country is a bedrock principle. Our forebears fought the War of Independence for fair representation. We need fair representation. We need fair maps. We need a functional democracy right here in Wisconsin.
Thank you, Matt. And then our final speaker before we take a couple of questions is the co-chair of Common Cause Wisconsin and the co-chair of the Fair Elections Project, former Senate Majority Leader and Leader for Democracy, Tim Cullen.
Thank you very much, Sachin. It's really a pleasure to be here. Senator Dale Schultz and I have been going around the state. We've been in 40 communities starting in about 2013, and I can tell you that the people of Wisconsin by 2017 know all about this problem, and they don't like it. There's tremendous support for change. And I was sitting here looking down that way and seeing the university. I'm thinking, the leaders in this building want to take away tenure for the professors down there, but they're just fine giving themselves 10 years of tenure in this building. A little bit inconsistent. The Iowa map, the Iowa plan, which is Senator Hansen's bill, it's a terrific idea. Adopted in Iowa in 1980. It's been through the 80, 90, 2000, 2010 cycles. During all those 40 years, that plan is so popular in Iowa that no legislator of either party in 40 years has ever introduced one bill to change it. Iowa loves it. I believe for sure that Wisconsin would love it. So I'm glad you're all here. This is a fight we can win. Gerrymandering is too nice of a word. The proper words are rigged elections. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tim. Thanks for your leadership. We want to point out that there are 37 county boards that have passed a resolution demanding a fair redistricting process. 2/3 of those counties voted for the Republican presidential candidate in 2016. The average margin that those county boards are passing this resolution by is 3-1. This is a grassroots issue that has support from liberals, conservatives, and independents all over the state of Wisconsin. Are there any questions from the media for any of our panelists?
The Supreme Court process didn't get brought up too much here today, but isn't it becoming obvious the later the court goes that even if they side with you guys, they're not going to force the state to redraw the map?
I don't think that's obvious at all, Theo. I do think there's some experts that said that. Sean, I read your story the other day with great interest. Look, our position is very clear from the date we introduced the lawsuit in July of 2015. These maps are unconstitutional, should be overturned, and we shouldn't have another election under them. I think the plaintiffs have said very clearly, if the maps are overturned, if the Supreme Court upholds the trial court decision, then we will have unconstitutional maps, and you can't have an election under unconstitutional maps. What has happened in other states and in other cycles is that if the schedule has to be adjusted, the schedule will be adjusted. If we get past June 1 and they have to reopen signature gathering in new districts, then they'll do that. If they have to address the primary election timeline, they'll have to do that. But it is not our position that you can have elections under unconstitutional maps that deprive people of their rights. You just can't do that. If people's rights are being deprived, you have to solve that issue. And if it gets later in June, then that will obviously cause some effect on the Wisconsin calendar. But the general election isn't until November, and they can schedule a runoff after that if they need to. So there are a lot of ways and a lot of pathways to holding fair elections in Wisconsin in 2018 under new and fair maps for the legislature.
Session. I had heard maybe early April is a possible decision.
I'm not a lawyer, but what we're hearing now from the experts and from even our lawyers out of the Campaign Legal Center is that with the March 28th argument in the Maryland case, that we think it's going to be a little bit of time after that, and that we may see the decisions in the Wisconsin and the Maryland case fairly close together in time, and that might be in May or June of this year. So we recognize that that's a challenge, but we think it's a challenge that the state of Wisconsin can handle.
Do you think the court's going to settle both at the same time? Is that appropriate to have Republican maps and Democratic maps settled?
Well, I think, look, here's what's most important, right, is that there's a Republican case, Republican plaintiffs, where the Democrats rigged the map in Maryland, clearly unfair to the people of Maryland. And so that proves to the court that there are Republican cases and Democratic cases. It's a bipartisan problem, and there's a bipartisan solution, which is to make the process independent. We do think... from our best understanding is that I don't think the cases are going to be joined. They're very different in terms of the legal theory, but I do think that we're going to see decisions close to each other in time, yes. Any other questions? All right, well, thanks everybody for being here, and thanks. Go Naps now, everybody.